Preparing for your N400 naturalization interview. Tips for some key items. Before your naturalization interview, you should review the answers you wrote on the N400 form that you submitted. For basic information about yourself and members of your family, such as dates of birth, you should be able to answer from memory at your naturalization interview. For smaller details, such as the dates of starting and stopping each of your jobs, you do not need to remember exact dates, but should have some general idea. For example, how many years you worked at each job. Just as each person's N400 application answers are different from other applicants' answers, how difficult it will be for you to answer N400 questions in your interview depends in part on your personal situation. An applicant who has been married a few times or has had a dozen jobs in the last 5 years should prepare to be able to explain if asked why. An applicant who has never had a paying job should prepare to be able to explain how she or he supports herself or himself or is supported by someone else. There are, however, some key items on the N400 application that every applicant should pay attention to and be ready to explain if needed. This video looks at those key N400 items. In Part 2 of the N400, Item 1 asks for your current legal name. In most cases, this is the name in your passport. It will also be the name on your birth certificate, unless you changed your legal name through a government office at some time. It may be different from the name shown on your permanent resident card, your green card. This is why the N400 has a separate question about the name on your green card. Your legal name also may be different from the name you usually tell friends and relatives. Item 3 in Part 2 asks about other names you have used. You should be prepared to tell where or when these names were used. Be sure to check your important documents to see if your name on those is different from your legal name. These documents include your Social Security card, driver's license or state ID card, financial accounts such as bank or credit cards, mortgage or rental papers, and so on. Finally, in Part 2 of the N400, Item 9 asks for the date you became a permanent resident. If you had a difficult or very long process getting a green card, such as after many years as an asylee or through a court case, be prepared to explain briefly what happened in that process. If the USCIS interviewer asks for this explanation, it is usually to check that your report of what happened matches what USCIS records show. You are not being asked to justify again having a green card. Part 5 of the N400, Information about your residence, asks you to list your home addresses in the last 5 years. If you have had 4 or more home addresses in the last 5 years, you should be prepared to explain why you changed addresses that much. Part 6 asks for information about your parents, if one or both of them are U.S. citizens. If you did fill out this part because you have 1 or 2 U.S. citizen parents, it is possible that you already have U.S. citizenship through a parent. In that case, you are supposed to file an N-600 application for a certificate of citizenship instead of an N-400 application. At your N-400 interview, the USCIS interviewer may ask about this. You should be prepared to tell when your U.S. citizen parent or parents became U.S. citizens, and your age, home address, and green card status at that time. Part 8 asks about your employment in the last 5 years. If you have no current employment, if you are not working in a paid job now, be prepared to explain how you support yourself, or how someone such as a spouse, relative, or friend supports you. Also, if you have changed jobs often and have had more than 3 employers in the last 5 years, be prepared to explain why you changed jobs so many times. Part 9 asks about your time outside the United States. Any trips you had to other countries since you got your green card. There are a few reasons why USCIS asks about these trips. One of the reasons is checking for unusual behavior, which might indicate that you are doing something considered bad moral character. If you have a very large number of frequent trips outside the U.S., for example, to conduct your business in 2 countries, you should be prepared to explain the reason for these frequent trips. A big reason why USCIS asks about trips outside the U.S. is to make sure that you have spent enough time living in the U.S. to be eligible for naturalization. U.S. law has limits on how much time someone can spend outside the U.S. and still apply for naturalization. For example, in most cases, if you stay outside for 1 year or more, you will probably need to wait longer to be eligible for naturalization. If you have any trip outside the U.S. that was 6 months or longer, you should be prepared to explain why you had to stay so long. If you have documents that support your explanation, such as a hospital record for a long hospital stay in your home country, bring those to your naturalization interview. You should prepare in the same way if you had 2 or more trips within a 12-month period that, added together, were more than 6 months total. For example, if you had 3 trips of 3 months each in 1 year, for a total of 9 months, you should prepare to explain why you had to make so many trips. In Part 10, Information about your marital history, Item 3 asks how many times you have been married. If you have been married more than 2 times, be prepared to explain why each of your past marriages ended. If you are married now, make sure that you can give oral answers from memory to Item 4, Parts A, D, E, and F. If your spouse's home address in Item F is different from your home address, be prepared to explain why you do not live together. Part 10, Item 9 asks for information about past marriages. If you filled in this item on your N-400, review your answer for Part H about how your marriage ended. If your answer is anything other than spouse deceased, be prepared to explain why the marriage ended. Part 12 of the N-400 asks many questions related to the requirement that applicants for naturalization have good moral character. Just trying to understand these questions in an interview is not easy, so make sure that you practice them before your interview. Also, during the interview, ask for explanation in simpler English if you are not sure of the meaning of the question. For some kinds of answers to some of the questions, you should be prepared to explain details of why you answered that way. For any items from number 1 to number 43, be prepared to explain yes answers. For item 9, about membership in organizations, if you answered yes for part A, be prepared to give more details of the purpose of the group for each group listed in part B. If you answered yes to any of items number 23 to 28, you should have filled out the chart in item number 29. At your interview, be prepared to talk about any details of what you wrote in the item 29 chart. You should also bring any related documents to your interview, such as papers from a court. Item 44 asks about registration for selective service. If you are required to register for selective service, but did not register before filling out your N400 application, make sure that you read Part C of item 44. If you registered for selective service, bring your registration confirmation to your interview. If you have a status information letter from selective service, bring that to your interview. Also be prepared to explain at your interview why you did not register when you were between the ages of 18 and 26. If you answered no to any items number 45 to 50, be prepared to explain why. If you can, bring a written explanation to your interview. Part 14 asks about any interpreter who helped you fill out your N400 application. If you filled out Part 14, be prepared to explain at your interview why you needed an interpreter to help you. If you are required to pass a test of English to become a U.S. citizen, it will help if you can also explain at your interview how you worked to improve your English after filing your N400. Part 15 asks for information about any person other than an interpreter who helped you fill out your N400. If you filled out Part 15, be prepared to explain at your interview why you needed help from that person to fill out your N400. During your naturalization interview, the USCIS interviewer will help you fill out Part 16. Putting your signature, signing your name, in Part 16 says that you confirm that you are telling the truth on your N400 form and in your interview. You should be prepared to explain in your own words what the written statement means. For example, that you are telling the truth, you are not lying. Part 18 of the N400 repeats the content of items number 45 to 50. The interviewer will ask you to print and sign your name in Part 18 to confirm that you agree to these requirements to become a U.S. citizen. You may also be asked to explain in your own words what each of the requirements means, so you should prepare simple explanations in English. Reviewing your answers on your N400 application and practicing talking about your answers will help you feel more confident during your naturalization interview. If you have time, schedule time with a tutor or teacher to have a practice interview. Good luck in your real interview.